So what did you just find there, Matt?
I found a three-ridge mussel that had a pretty large wing on it, like a heel splitter.
Easily misidentified by a non-expert to be a heel splitter then.
Yeah, as Dave has told me many times, going by any one particular characteristic on these is dangerous because they frequently lack one or have an exaggerated feature that's not common in the species.
Yeah.
And you really need to look at the whole mussel overall and sort of take the
sum of it.
Yes, yeah, the sum of its parts and make your best guess based on that.
For field identification, and then for taxonomists who are actually doing classifications, they'd have to really carefully assess the level of variation within species and be able to describe it based on that range of features. Now, it seems to me you guys actually know quite a bit about recognizing mussels when you see them, but I have to assume that even experts like you have trouble now and then identifying species based on just their appearance. Is that true to assume?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we were just talking about at the one site we were at yesterday and the day before that I mean, there's some pretty distinctive characteristics of some of them, but we were finding some, like the purple warty back, that it has the pustules on it, kind of like the pustulosa, that sort of extend up the beak. But then when you look at the beak, it has the characteristics are more like the maple leaf, where you can see these two rows, and so you know. And then if we would find shells, I think usually the nacre was purple, which is much more common in the purple warty back. But it's just funny when you see these seemingly key characteristics that can exist on the same animal.
Yeah, and it makes it difficult if you're looking at one individual and you see these two key characteristics of two different species. Do you say like which of these is more important, which is the distinguishing characteristic? Can I definitively say which it is? And there's a number of things, like you can look at the shape of the shell, you can look at the beak sculpture, you can look at the color of the nacre, if you just have the valves. So there's a number of different things that collectively you can say there's more groupings from this one, but there's other pairs of species where we've had the same trouble with the fawn's foot and the deer toe.
The wabash toes
And the round.
And are those closely related to each other?
The deer toe and the fawn's foot are in the same genus.
Okay.
So we do have some trouble with those because there's, on the posterior end, there's this posterior ridge, and on one it tends to be sharper and angled downwards, and on one it flares up a little more, but depending on how old the animal is and
and even just
what river it's in.
Yeah, well, and even just the variability of the pattern of on the periostracum. You know, we have some that are really distinctively different, and then yesterday we pulled up one of each. What we decided was one of each, but they had the exact same sort of shell marking, which sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. And in that case, it was just funny. It was like they looked identical, except for one had a much more defined posterior ridge and one was.
So variation.
Yeah.
And this definitely would have implications for the taxonomy of this group, I have to assume. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it certainly does, and we were saying that historically a lot of the early classification of these animals was done using conchological characters, using shell characters, and that leads to some problems where species have convergent evolution, where they've got similar traits but not closely related species. And I think the numbers were that there are currently just over 300 recognized species in North America, but in the past that's been as high as 500, and a lot of that reorganization has been done based on genetics largely, to try to clarify some of those relationships. So the shell characters are helpful, but they're not the be-all and end-all, and they can be quite difficult to use in the field sometimes. Other times they're great. So there are soft tissue characters, and then of course into genetics to help clarify what those true relationships are between.
But ultimately, we're striving for a classification that reflects real evolutionary relationships among these different lineages, and not just their physical similarity and
absolutely.
And so on.
Yeah, we want to understand the development over evolutionary scales, not who looks like who.
Right. Very good. Thank you very much.
Well, what we're trying to figure out, we think that
that what this is a round hickory nut, Various subrotunda, which is an endangered species in Canada, and one that we haven't seen in the Thames River in about 70 years, and we probably only have about a half a dozen live records of this species ever in Canada. So it's a significant find if it turns out that these are in fact round hickory nuts and they are still living here. But one of the problems that we have is distinguishing it from another species, Quadrilla pustulosa, the pimpleback. And you can see the overall shape of the animals is very similar, but the pimpleback gets its common name from the fact that it usually has these pimples or bumps on its back, on the posterior surface of the shell, but sometimes they don't. And we find that a lot of times at this site, the animals don't have these bumps. So we have to go with secondary characters like this green stripe on the beaks. And of course, this animal doesn't have the green stripe either. So we're trying to sort out that. What we believe to be the round hickory nut here has this lighter surface on the posterior portion of the shell, so it has the dark brown and then the lighter surface, which the pimpleback would not normally have. So we're just working on those identifications and trying to confirm what species we have, and it goes to the overall census of the site, as well as to determining whether we have this endangered species here. And if we have the endangered species, then we can do some additional work to try to quantify or figure out the densities and sex ratios and all sorts of stuff of the species at the site.
Excellent. So that endangered species, if it's not been found here for 70 years, that's not an effective zebra mussels, for example. That's got to be...
No, it wouldn't be an effective zebra mussels. They're not, although there are zebra mussels in the lower Thames River because of the Fanshawe Reservoir in London. We do find them at this site, but they're in very, very low densities, maybe one or two animals. So they're not driving the species out here. This would be more related to habitat loss, primarily from agricultural activities, urban development, water quality issues is a lot of it, and substrate disturbances, siltation, things like that. So yeah, there are different threats for the species in the rivers versus what we find in the lakes.
Right, okay.